Okay, guys, so this is actually my third attempt now at trying to do this video. For some reason, the yard crew is outside of the apartment doing their stuff, so I've had a lot of random noises. Plus, my dog has decided she wants to play randomly. So, but I think I've gotten all that taken care of now. So we should be able to actually get through this video this time. I hope. If not, then we'll just do it again, and you guys will never see this part. But if you do see this part, then that means that this video worked. So, all right. Without any further ado on that, let's go ahead and get started with the JavaScript portion of the TicTacToe game here. So the first thing I'm going to do here is we're going to start off by just declaring some variables. We're going to actually grab those things that we originally created in the HTML. So I'm going to create a variable for boxes, and then I'm also going to create a variable that's going to determine whether or not we're on an X or an O. And then we'll set up some logic to actually have that determine whether or not we're setting the inner HTML as an X or as an O based off of what this variable is actually set at. So cool. So to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and declare a const here, and we're going to call this boxes. And what this is going to do is we're going to do a get element by class name, or elements by class name, sorry. And we're going to go document dot get elements by class name. And what that's going to let us do is it's going to let us grab all of those elements with that class name of box that we created over here in the HTML. So that's going to grab all of those. Now what this is going to do is it's actually going to return this kind of array-like object. And so we're going to have to do a for loop so that later on we know exactly which of those boxes we're actually clicking when we click it. So just be aware of that. And I'll kind of walk you through that when we do it here in a second. And the next thing we're going to do is right below that, we're going to go ahead and declare that other variable. We're going to call this one let X or O. And again, you don't have to call it this. You can call it something else if you wanted to. I'm just doing this so that way, if someone looks at this later on, they have a better idea of what exactly we are declaring with this. So we're going to set that to 0 for right now. So what we're going to do is basically every time we click one of these boxes, this is going to be iterated up by 1. And then we're going to set up a modulo operator where we're going to determine whether or not we're at an even number or an odd number. If we're at an odd number, we'll display an O. If we're at an even number, we'll display an X. So since 0 is an even number in this case, we are going to always start off with X whenever we start playing this game in this case. And then, of course, once we complete the game, we'll reset that back to 0 again. So that way you always restart the game starting with X. But you could set it up to where you started with O as well. It doesn't really matter. Or you could do other symbols if you wanted to. I'm assuming X and O for this. But like if you wanted to put in like emojis or something or some kind of graphic or an image or something else, you could totally do that as well. So this is other applications outside of TicTacToe. But I am going to just go ahead and move forward before I start going off on a ramble. Okay. So just to kind of show you what happens when we do that, let's go ahead and console log the boxes here. And that's going to show you that array-like object I was talking about. So you can see it down here in this HTML collection. It kind of gives you this object that sort of looks like an array. That we'll be working with here. So it does have like a length, it does have indices, but it's not a true array like what we're used to dealing with necessarily. So just be aware of that. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close that out now and minimize that back down. Perfect. Okay, cool. So we have that. So now what we're gonna do, and I'm gonna go ahead and just comment that. I'll just delete that out actually, I don't even need that. Okay, so then what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and set up that for loop. So this for loop is gonna let us basically determine which of the boxes we are clicking on at any given moment. So we're just gonna say for, and then we're gonna say let I equals 0. So just your standard for loop at this point. And I is less than box.length, which in this case is 9 because we know that. But again, I'm just gonna do the length because you might be putting in something that has varying lengths at some point here. So and we iterate up by 1. Okay, cool. So now, so this is just going to let us actually figure out, which of the boxes we're clicking on at this point in time. So then the next step we're going to do is we're going to say boxes at I, oops, not curly bracket, boxes at I, and then we're going to do on click. And once we click it, we want to then run a function. So in this case, we're just going to set an anonymous function here. That's going to get run every time we click one of those boxes. And what this is going to then do is then we're going to say, all right, if, and then X or O modulo 2. So we're going to be checking to see if this is an even number in this case, or basically if the modulo returns a 0, so it doesn't have a remainder, meaning that it's, in this case, even. We're going to do that, and then we are going to I should just set this inner HTML, and we're going to set that equal to X in this case, and then we're going to say else. And since we're doing this as, it's either going to be one or the other, right? So like we're not going to have multiple conditions in this case, so I can just do an else statement here. If you had multiple conditions, you would do an else if, or another if statement, depending on what you're trying to do. You can also do a switch statement, I suppose, in this case. But yeah, so we're just going to go ahead and do this. We're going to say else if modulo 2 is not 0, then I want to set this dot inner HTML as being equal to O. Okay, so basically, and since this is all linked to this function here, this is why I can use this instead of having to do like boxes I or something. Okay, cool. So we have that. So let's go ahead and check the. Oh, actually, wait. What I do need to do though is I also need to go ahead and increment up the X or O. So we'll say X or O, and we'll set that as oops, 1, and then we'll do the same thing down here. Cool. Okay, so basically what we're doing here is it's going to come through here, and the first time it's going to run this, it's going to say, okay, cool, you're 0, therefore when I do a modulo 2, you give me no remainder. So we're going to set the inner HTML of whatever I clicked to display a X here, and then we're going to increment up the X or O variable by 1, which means the next time I click it, it should display a O, increment by 1, display an X, increment by 1, so on and so forth. So let's just go ahead and test that real fast and see if this part is working the way we expect. So cool. So the first time we have an X, second time we have an O, next time we have an X, next time we have an O, next time we have an X, and so on and so forth. Of course, there's no reset feature yet at this point or anything like that. And if you click the same thing multiple times, it will just keep changing it because there's nothing to prevent it from doing that, right? But cool. So we definitely have at least that logic working now. So I'm going to go ahead and just refresh that so that goes away. And we'll minimize you back down. All right, so now what we're going to need to do is we're going to have to start creating some victory conditions and loss conditions, right? So for this, I'm going to go ahead and just start setting up the victory conditions. So the victory condition are down here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function, and we're going to call that function something like winner. So we'll say function. Let's not make that capital. We'll say function winner. And now we need to set all these victory conditions. So, okay, so the way I did this is I use a lot of if statements for this. You could, of course, use switch statements if you wanted to. But like I said, I'm doing this kind of as a brute force approach for this particular project because I feel like from a learning perspective, as a new developer, this is giving me a chance and hopefully someone else a chance to kind of see exactly what the logic is doing in a more step-by-step fashion, as opposed to having some like single line algorithm that maybe has higher order functions and things that you don't necessarily fully understand yet. So I'm breaking this down basically, like I said, to a brute force approach for this particular project. just so you can hopefully better see the logic that's going on behind the scenes here. But if you have another way of doing it, that's fine. By all means, go for it. And like I said, anybody watching this video, if you have another way of doing it that is not a brute force way, by all means, please, comment below, link your code pin or GitHub or whatever with that repo. So other people can take a look at that too and everything, so we can all kind of learn. So yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna do I'm just gonna set up the initial victory condition, and then I'm gonna actually cut and paste just to save time. Since it's just going to basically be the same thing, it's just going to be using the different boxes and things to compare against. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say if, and I'm going to say box 1. So this is why we used those IDs earlier. Is we're going to say if the inner HTML of box 1 is blank, or I'm sorry, is not blank, then we're going to check to see if the boxes next to it in this case. So the first one's going to be for the top 3. So it's going to be box 1, box 2, box 3. And if all 3 of those have the same inner HTML, then it's going to select those as the winner boxes, right? Because we now have 3 in a row. So let's go ahead and do that. So inner HTML is not blank, and box 1 HTML is equal to box 2 dot HTML and box 1 dot HTML is equal to box 3 dot HTML. Okay, so what I'm doing here is just saying if there is something inside of box 1, then I want to compare box 1, whatever's inside of box 1, to box 2, and also compare whatever's inside box 1 to box 3. Okay. If those all match, right, if they're all equal, then what I want it to do is do a thing. So in this case, the thing that I want it to do is select winner boxes, and it's going to select those as being, oops, that was a fly, as being box 1, box 2, and box 3. So what I'm doing here, we haven't created this function yet, but we're going to create a function in a second that is going to be called select winner boxes, and that is what is going to apply a new dynamic class to box 1, box 2, and box 3 in this case, where they're going to light up as green and then still display on the screen as the winning boxes. So that is what that is. And I'm going to go ahead and do a semicolon there. Okay, so instead of doing this over and over and over and over again here, what I'm going to do is I've already written this all out, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this so that we have the rest of these victory conditions here. So, oops, and yeah. So, okay, so what we're doing here, and I'm just going to do this because I just like making things look nicer. Don't need that last one there anymore. So basically in here, what we've done is I've just gone through, and like I said, I did this as a brute force way, where basically I'm just going through and I'm saying, okay, we've got only so many conditions, right? We either have across, down, or diagonal, right? So in this case, this would be one of the diagonal ones. This would be another diagonal one, I believe, right? No, actually that's not. So this would be Let's see, box 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Okay, so this is going to be the across victory conditions. This would be the up and down victory conditions. So actually, we'll just go ahead and make some comments here. So I'll say, conditions, and then this would be the and then down here is going to be the diagonal one. So okay, yeah. So and the reason these work is so we start off here. So if we go over to the actual thing here, and I look at these. So this is box 1, this is box 4, this is box 7. So what we have here are, we're comparing box 1, box 4, and box 7, and we're just doing the same thing where we're just comparing it with the other boxes in its row, right? So we're comparing box 7 with box 8 and box 9, comparing box 4 with box 5 and box 6, which in this case would be box 4, box 5, box 6, box 7, so on and so forth. For the vertical conditions, we're doing the same thing. We're just taking box 1, 2, and 3, and we're comparing them with box 3 with box 6 and box 9, box 2 with box 5 and box 8, box 1 with box 4 and box 7. And then, of course, the diagonal one down here, we're comparing box 1 here with box 5 and box 9. You can see down there, and then box 3, which is the other up and or diagonal, with box 5 and box 7. So that's going to give us our victory conditions. So now what should happen? Well, actually, nothing will happen yet because I haven't put this function in yet. So what we can do now is we will come down here, and I will say, let's create a function for selecting the winner boxes here. So we will just go ahead and do that. So we will say function boxes, and I am going to pass in victory 1, or V1, in this case V2, and V3. And you could call these whatever you want, but we'll be referencing these inside the function. So in this case, for example, up here, select winner boxes, box 1 becomes V1, box 2 becomes V2, box 3 becomes V3, and so on and so forth for all of these here when we're passing those arguments in. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say V1, and this is where that dynamic class came in that I was talking about earlier. So we're going to actually do class list add, and so we're going to be adding the class of win to V1 in this case. And then we'll go ahead and just copy and paste that and do the same thing for V2 and V3. So all right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add the class of win, which is down here is this, which will also give us that win hover as well with the pseudo class there. So basically, once those conditions are met, then what we should see is we should then see those winning boxes light up as green. So let's go ahead and check that real quick and see if that is working at this point. Everything is saved. Oops. Okay, so do that, and we'll do X, no, and then X. Okay, and it is not displaying yet. Let's see why. Class win. Did I not save something? Select winner boxes. Oh, of course. I'm never actually running this function here. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to go ahead and we're going to run the function winner. So, and we'll do it here as well. Okay, so now it should work. There we go. Okay, cool. So it's working. So yeah, basically what's happening now is every time we do this, it's going to run this function each time we click, and then it's going to run through this, it's going to look to see if any of these conditions are met, and if they're met, then it's going to go ahead and do this here. If not, then it just won't do anything for the moment, except for iterate up here. Cool. So the next thing we're going to do is now we want to go ahead. I mean, that theoretically would be kind of good enough, I guess, but I also wanted to clear out the remaining things so that when you display after you win, it only displays the 3 winning boxes and none of the other boxes. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a whole series of non-winner conditions. And again, to save time, I'm going to go ahead and just cut and paste this on over. You don't necessarily have to do this part, but if you want to, you can. But all I'm doing is effectively the same thing I did here for each of these. But what I'm doing is instead of taking the boxes that I was comparing against, I'm taking all the other boxes that I was not comparing against, and I am doing this function here. Now, I could combine, this a little bit so that, it took, basically I could do something like this if I wanted to, just to, cut down the lines. But again, for the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it like this, so that way, again, you can see everything step by step, exactly what we're doing in each one of these places here. But that probably wouldn't be something you would normally do, except for learning purposes. So, now we've created this non-winner function. So we're just going to go through here and we're going to say, okay, if box 1 matches box 2 and box 3, then box 4, box 5, box 6, box 7, box 8, and box 9, which obviously are none of those, now are going to become non-winner boxes. And we want to now run another function that's going to dynamically add the class of loss to those boxes that are defined here. So again, I was going to cut and paste that. So again, using the same naming convention of the V1, V4, so on and so forth, all the way to V9. This case can be V4, V5, V6, V7, V8, and V9. In which case, actually line up with this one in particular here. So box 4 becomes V4, box 5 becomes V5, so on and so forth. And then we're just adding to those the class of loss. So that's what we're doing there. And again, if we were to say triggering this one here, then what would happen is box 1 becomes V4, box 2 becomes V5, so on and so forth, right? So cool. So that's what I did there. And of course, you could name these whatever you want. You could call it, A, B, C, D, whatever, as long as then you reference it appropriately here as well. So, okay. So we have that. And now what should happen when I run this, of course, also to run the function non-winner here as well. So we'll say non-winner, and all right. So we're going to run that, and now if I run this again, and we, cool. So now it's clearing out all the boxes that were not winning boxes. All right. So we're making progress. And all right, so now we are going to go ahead and do the reset feature here. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to make a new function called replay. And that function is just going to basically do kind of what we did up here, right? Only it's going to be not conditional, except for it's going to do it across all the boxes once we click the button here to reset it. So for that, we still need to do the for loop because again, we're dealing with a that array-like object. So we're going to do that. Let equal 0. And then we're going to say boxes I dot remove. And, okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and just, oops, I'm going to go ahead and cut and paste this down here. Only we'll change that to loss. And then what we're going to do is we're going to reset the inner HTML back to blank. And I'm going to go ahead and reset the X or O counter here back to 0. So this way we can always guarantee that we're going to start off with the same character on the first click. And then we're also going to turn dot. Oops. I have no idea what happened there. That was really weird. Turn dot. Okay, that's bizarre. Let's try it that way then. Okay. Sometimes Visual Studio Code does some strange things. Yeah. All right, and then we're going to reset turn inner HTML to play, and turn, if we remember, was not created yet, actually. Oh, wait, no, there it is. Yeah. Okay, so it's there. So we're just going to reset that back to play again. Now, let's see. Oh, yeah, and then also up here, I do want to add one more thing. So I want to do turn dot inner HTML equals v1 dot HTML plus actually, you know, this is a string literal here instead. So let's do backtick, and I will do this. HTML. Yeah, we'll say congrats. Nope, don't want an M on the end of that. All right, cool. Cool. Okay, so let's see if that works. So if we go through here, click all this, boom, and now we have X1. Congrats. We still don't reset yet. Why are we not resetting? Oh yes, because I have not hooked this up yet. Okay, so the next step is we're going to go ahead and hook up this play again button. So to do that, we're just going to come back down here. We're going to look at this, and that's just function replay. So we're going to go over here, and we are just going to go inside a button. We're going to do an on click and set that equal to replay. And we save that. And now when we go check this again, make sure everything's saved. Yep. Should have X1, congrats. And now we reset. And now we can play again. And in this case, we'll set it up so that O wins. Cool. And then O wins. Congrats. Yay. All right, cool. So that is how I created the TicTacToe game using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Like I said, feel free to play around with it. You could add additional features and things. So you could have it, you know, I don't know, say keep score potentially if you wanted to. I didn't bother to do that this time, but you could do something like that if you wanted to. But this should definitely get you started though, and kind of give you a better understanding of how certain object selectors, you know, some basic DOM manipulation here, and also kind of how to do some conditional statements and conditional rendering based off of those statements and things like that. So anyways, I hope this video was helpful. And like I said, if you guys liked it, you know, please subscribe. Feel free to leave comments below if you have any suggestions for future videos or future tutorials or anything like that. I am totally up for that. Yeah, and that is pretty much it. So like I said, hope this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. So have a great one. Bye-bye.